Hi, it's Katrina. Large-toothed sawfish. The large-toothed sawfish is just as terrifying as it sounds. It's a type of ray that has a snout, kind of like the end of a chainsaw. Its snout is called a rostrum, and it's used for two very important things. It's for hunting and for detecting electric fields. The large-toothed sawfish is a massive predator and about as fierce as a miniature shark. But the giant saw on the end of its face is one of the most unique biological marvels in the world. It has thousands of tiny organs working together to activate the animal's sixth sense, detecting the invisible electric field emitted by all living organisms. Everything emits a small bit of electricity, and the large-toothed sawfish can sense that electricity like a visible aura. Scientists call it distant touch. The fish doesn't rely on sight or sound, but sees the world through this almost magical sensory ability. The other thing it uses its snout for is hunting. It dismembers and kills its prey. It thrashes its rostrum back and forth in saw-like motions to stun, kill, and cut its victims into nice, digestible pieces. It also uses the chainsaw on its head to fight off potential predators, things like sharks and saltwater crocodiles. This river monster is huge. An adult sawfish can be over 20 feet long, and they live for about 35 years. They used to live throughout the entire world, anywhere that there were lakes and rivers and estuaries, but since they've become critically endangered, the sawfish has much fewer numbers than even just 100 years ago. South African crocodile. Crocodiles in South Africa are some of the most dangerous river beasts you will hopefully never encounter. There are not a lot of things more terrifying than just trying to cross a river in this African nation. Take the recent story of Mavis Molala, for example. She was on her way to a church service in the province of Limpopo, close to the border of Botswana and Zimbabwe, when she came across a river crocodile. The woman had to cross the Lepele River at 7:00 p.m. to get to her church. But according to eyewitnesses, Mavis was almost at the end of the river crossing when she shouted for help. When her friends looked, they saw a crocodile had dragged her backwards into the river. The woman's friend caught the crocodile just in time and poked it in the eyeball, causing it to give up on Mavis and swim away. But even after just a few seconds of being chewed on by the crocodile, the attack badly injured her. The poor woman struggled to survive for nearly 5 long days before sadly dying from her injuries. Even though authorities aren't 100% sure what kind of crocodile attacked Mavis, they believe it was probably a Nile crocodile. That's the biggest croc in all of Africa. According to National Geographic, these crocodiles kill roughly 200 people a year, and at the time of Mavis's death in 2019, the Nile crocodiles had already killed 48 other people that year in Africa. The White River Monster. There is an old Native American legend that speaks of a bizarre creature lurking in the depths of the White River in Arkansas. It's called the White River Monster, and locals are so convinced it's real that the legislature made it illegal to kill or harm the creature in any way. Residents of the area know the beast simply as Whitey, and it's been part of the White River for over 150 years. The legend started with the Quapaw Indians, who claimed Whitey overturned a warrior's canoe, then sank back into the depths of the river and vanished. And in the days of the Civil War, local historians even credited the monster with flipping over a Confederate gunship. But is there any truth to these tales? It's supposedly over 30 feet long, with a spiny backbone like a river serpent. It's also said to make loud, bellowing sounds. One biologist suggested the creature could have been a lost elephant seal seen by farmers and fishermen in the early 1930s. Others believe the creature, which nobody has seen in the last few years, died when the water levels started dropping and the river became too shallow for it to live in. But the truth is, there is no solid evidence to suggest the White River Monster really exists. There's also no solid evidence to suggest that it doesn't. The Florida Arapaima. Florida beachgoers recently discovered the most dangerous river fish in all the Amazon jungle dead in Florida. They found the rotting corpse of an arapaima washed up on a Florida beach. Authorities are now concerned that this gigantic, nearly unstoppable fish has joined the list of invasive species already plaguing the state. Even though this fish can thrive in Florida's warm waters, the native fish might not fare as well. These things can grow to be 440 pounds. They have endless appetites, and they can eat whatever they want. That's bad news for Florida's natural wildlife, already having to contend with invasive snakes, spiders, and now Amazonian river monsters. Aquatic ecologist Solomon David says it might not be anything to worry about. He says Arapaima requires very specific parameters to breed. They don't reach their sexual maturity until 5 feet, which happens after about 5 years, and they will only breed in specific areas. This means there probably isn't a large population of them. The one that was found beached had probably been an exotic pet that got thrown into the river. Sad, but it happens quite a bit. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often, or the Arapaima population could explode. These fish are also pretty dangerous to people, so heavy and such swift swimmers that they can headbutt a person and make their heart stop. Getting hit by an Arapaima is like getting hit by a wrecking ball. Goliath Tigerfish. The Goliath Tigerfish is one of the meanest looking river monsters anywhere. They have ice picks for teeth. You could also call them huge spiked daggers. Their teeth are massive and deadly, and to make the fish even more terrifying, it can grow to be as big as a human. But the Goliath Tigerfish's bite is way stronger than that of a person, and their teeth are about the size of eagle talons. These fish are not enemies you want to mess with. The Goliath Tigerfish has a distinct reputation among fishermen. They are notorious for ripping chunks out of people who try to pull them out of the water, making them unpopular with anglers. You can find the Goliath only in Africa. Nowhere else in the world do they breed except in the lakes and rivers of the Congo River Basin. They're known to the locals for being incredibly aggressive. So aggressive, they have a kind of supernatural status in the community. There are all kinds of legends about the Goliath Tigerfish, with one of the main myths having to do with an evil spirit. In some of the Congolese cultures, they say a malicious entity that forces it to attack anyone who gets too close possesses the Goliath Tigerfish. They also believe that if you see one of these fish at the beginning of a voyage, you're going to have terrible luck. If there was an evil spirit that possessed one sea creature that you knew, which one would it be? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about incredible animals. The Mega Piranha. There was once a gigantic piranha living in the rivers of the Amazon, about 3 times bigger than modern piranhas. And that's saying something, considering modern piranhas are so big and so vicious they can bite people's hands off. But what I'm talking about is the Mega Piranha, a fish that may have had the strongest bite of any sea creature in history relative to its size. Justin Grubich from American University says both the Mega Piranha and its living relatives have stronger bites than even the Megalodon. That means, pound for pound, the Mega Piranha and its tiny piranha relatives are some seriously fierce biters. But it is long gone. It lived roughly 5 million years ago in Argentina, first discovered by paleontologists back in 2009. Paleontologists have only found one part of the great beast's upper jaw, just one fossil, yet still enough to put together a clear picture of what the creature might have looked like. It was a true river monster, with serrated triangular teeth used to rip the flesh off its enemies and terrorize the prehistoric jungle rivers. Wild otters. When you think about river monsters, you think about creatures with big teeth and slimy bodies. But some river monsters are adorable, yet deadly. For example, wild river otters are some of the most dangerous animals that you can encounter in the state of Florida. They can rip you apart. In 2018, a 77-year-old woman found this out the hard way. One of these creatures attacked her, and it bit off a piece of her ear like an aquatic Mike Tyson. The victim, Sue Spector, was paddling up the Braden River with some friends and a guide. The otter jumped into the front of her kayak. She was pleased to see the little guy, and then it climbed up her back and started scratching at her face with its huge, sharp claws. What started as a cute nature encounter turned into a scene of chaos and desperation. The angry otter ripped off a piece of her ear, scratched her face into a bloody mess, and left everybody shaken. Even though the otter let her go, Sue wasn't out of the woods yet. One kayaker looked behind them and realized the otter was making a second approach. It wasn't done and was still out for blood. The kayakers had to go as quickly as they could back to the shore. where Sue had to get transported to the hospital. She was okay, but everyone else in the group was terrified of getting back in their kayaks. Australian crocodiles. South African crocodiles are pretty terrifying, the Great Nile crocs who kill hundreds of people per year. But there is no crocodile on Earth quite as terrifying as the Australian saltwater crocodile. These beastly reptiles can grow 23 feet long and often weigh in at over 1 ton. They are typically found throughout all of Australia's tropical north, living in just about every muddy river and every body of water. It should come as no surprise that Australians who go camping out in this deadly wilderness often find themselves victims of crocodile attacks. That's what happened in 2013, when a 24-year-old camper went missing. He was swimming with a friend near the Mary River Wilderness Retreat when, in front of horrified onlookers, the crocodile snatched him and pulled him underwater. The young man had been on his way back to the bank when the crocodile lunged at him, pulled him below the surface, and then swam away. The man was celebrating a friend's birthday and had never counted on being eaten by a crocodile. According to the authorities, that's exactly what he should have counted on. Everyone who visits the area is told repeatedly to not go swimming and to stay at least 15 feet away from the edge of any river. Police say alcohol probably had some influence on the young man's decision to swim, and sadly there was no sign of his body. The crocodile took him, and that was it. The Greenclawed monster of Dogtown. In the town of Evansville in 1955, residents were dealing with a streak of unrelenting heat and humidity. People didn't have air conditioning back then, so everyone congregated down at the water of the Ohio River. Among those seeking relief from the heat wave were Naomi Johnson and her 3 children. They went down to the Dogtown area of West Evansville and splashed about in the river. It wasn't moving that fast, and it was only about 15 feet deep. It was the perfect place for a sunny afternoon. But then something happened. As Naomi was out floating in the water, something wrapped around her knee. She would later describe the thing that grabbed her as a claw covered in hair. Whatever this hairy claw belonged to, it pulled Naomi beneath the surface. There was a huge struggle. Naomi kicked and kicked, trying desperately to get out of the creature's grasp. And when she finally got away from it, she swam as quickly as she could to the shore. In the end, Naomi was safe. Paramedics came and treated her lower leg for some bizarre cuts and scratches. But the thing that bothered the paramedics was that something bluish-green had stained her, and they couldn't get the stain off her leg. It looked like a giant hand had been squeezing her ankle, and it had leaked greenish ink into her skin. Nobody knows what attacked Naomi Johnson that day. It could have been a catfish, an overactive imagination, or a very real swamp monster living in the Ohio River. Radiation catfish. There are giant catfish living in the rivers and cooling ponds around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. You know, the one that exploded and leaked radiation into the atmosphere in 1986? And while you may have heard reports that these giant catfish result from radiation mutation, like the 3-eyed fish from The Simpsons, that's actually not the case. These catfish are just naturally large, and according to South Carolina radiation specialist Dr. Timothy Musso, radiation would cause mutations of a much different sort. Animals that become mutated are less likely to catch food. They don't live very long, are less effective in the world, and just have a much harder time surviving. He says very few mutations lead to gigantic growth. It's something that happens in science fiction, but not in the real world. When Jeremy Wade of River Monsters captured one of these catfish at Chernobyl and declared it to be 16 times more irradiated than a normal catfish, it was true. But it wasn't as alarming as people made it out to be. The huge catfish that live in the rivers around Chernobyl are radiated, but not enough to be turned into super mutants. These are Wells catfish, a species known to reach ridiculously huge sizes. Some of these fish can grow to be 800 pounds. The Wells catfish are so big, one of them could eat a small child if it floated close enough to its mouth. Anthrax Island. In Scotland, there is an island called Greenclawed, and you can't go there because it was poisoned by the government. The locals call it the Island of Death, or Anthrax Island. It's a forbidden zone and has been for almost 80 years. Back in World War II, this island became a secret biological weapons testing center for the UK government. Authorities won't allow anybody on the island, and it gets no visitors except the occasional kayaker brave enough to brush against its shores. The biological weapons being tested here were anthrax bombs. A team of about 50 scientists worked with locals and brought some sheep and set them up in pens. The military then dropped bombs from bomber planes filled with anthrax spores on the sheep to see how successful the infectious disease could be in a war situation. This was back in 1942. It became clear pretty quickly just how powerful anthrax could be. Within 3 days, the sheep were dead, and the island was uninhabitable. It was actually surprising that the people involved didn't get deathly ill. The final report from this experiment stated that biological weapons such as anthrax bombs can paralyze or render an entire city inhospitable. Governments have had access to city-destroying biological bombs for almost a century. As for the island, it's still considered a no-go zone, although the land is allegedly free from disease. The CocaCola Vault. The CocaCola Vault is one of the most unexpected forbidden places in the world. The reason is, of course, the secret recipe for Coca-Cola. It's considered one of the best-kept secrets in history, and it's stored in the CocaCola Vault, a place just about as secure as Fort Knox. The recipe for Coca-Cola was created by John Pemberton in Atlanta in 1886. He had studied pharmacy and was interested in chemistry. In the American Civil War, he was injured and soon became addicted to morphine. He tried to come up with opium-free painkillers and experimented with different recipes until he came up with his incredible concoction. He marketed it as a medicine that could cure headaches, relieve exhaustion, and calm the nerves. It gave you energy and tasted good, so of course everyone believes there must have been a small amount of cocaine in it. Ever since, competitors have been greedily trying to figure out how to recreate the formula with no success. The myth is that only 2 living people have ever seen the legendary formula with their own eyes. Elon Musk has tweeted that next on his list of purchases is going to be Coca-Cola, so he can put the cocaine back in it. But I digress. So let's look at the vault. It's at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta, a museum that shows the history and legacy of the company. This place opened in May 2007, and you can taste all kinds of flavors. Have you been there? While most of the facility is an ordinary museum, there is a high-tech vault inside holding the original recipe. The museum even has its own bottling line, so that visitors can get the freshest Coca-Cola in the world. You can actually see the vault at the museum while taking a tour, but there is no way you're getting into it. The only way you can get inside the vault and look at the secret formula is if you spend billions of dollars and buy it yourself. Plymouth. Plymouth is a ghost town on the island of Montserrat, a territory of the United Kingdom in the middle of the West Indies. Settlers built this town in the shadow of the Soufriere Hills volcano, which turned out to be a poor decision. The volcano has been active for a very long time, and in 1995, it became so active that Plymouth had to be evacuated. But it wasn't until 1997 that the residents permanently abandoned the town. Lava bombs and ash flows burned and buried the place, making it inhospitable. For centuries until that point, Plymouth had been the only port of entry to the island. It's still technically the capital of Montserrat, which makes it the only ghost capital of any political territory in the world. There is currently a new capital under construction on the other side of the island, but it's not ready yet. This is a dangerous place to go, and that's why there is the Soufriere Hills Volcano Exclusion Zone. This zone covers the entire southern part of the island. At least 2/3 of it is high risk because of flying rocks and unexpected pyroclastic bursts. Authorities have excluded anyone from entering this area. The entire place is vulnerable to volcanic phenomena, but the exclusion zone in particular is immediately dangerous. The volcano could blow, wiping everyone out. But even in the exclusion zone, a random tremor could cause a giant lava rock to land on your head. The Forbidden Amazon. The uncontacted frontier is an area in the Amazon jungle which straddles the borders of Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia. This area is home to the highest concentration of uncontacted tribes anywhere on the planet. Everywhere miners and loggers haven't destroyed the land, These people are still thriving. Everywhere else, drug traffickers, oil exploration, and that kind of thing have ravaged the land. Officials technically consider the uncontacted frontier a forbidden place. No outsiders allowed. There are at least 6 uncontacted tribes that we know of, but there could be more. We just don't know about them because nobody can go here and ask around. We also know very little about these people. Other than that they have no borders, they continue nomadic traditions which have been going on for centuries, and they are in imminent danger of being wiped out. Their biggest threats are rubber plantations and disease brought to them by greedy outsiders. That's one reason there is such a high concentration of uncontacted tribes here. When the rubber boom happened, invaders murdered or enslaved thousands of these Amazonian tribesmen. The few that remained fled into the deepest part of the Amazon and are now hiding out there. Still, as the industry pushes deeper into the jungle, their days seem numbered. What do these people do out there in the middle of the bush? We don't know very much, but most are nomadic, which means they move around depending on the seasons. When it's raining, they retreat away from the rivers into the deep forest, and when it's dry, they camp along the large stretches of river where they fish and collect turtle eggs. They also live in traditional communal housing, plant crops in any open parts of the forest they can find, and hunt in moderation. In theory, the government has designated this area a forbidden zone to protect the tribes, but they are constantly under threat. Mound Weather. Mound Weather is a secret government facility that is completely out of bounds and extremely mysterious. Located in Virginia, it covers about 564 acres, and it's the emergency operations backup site for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. We also know that on April 7, 2015, after a major electrical power outage hit the region of Washington, D.C., Mound Weather suddenly became extremely active. The very second the outage threatened the power in D.C., this mysterious facility lit up like a Christmas tree. Because of this, we know for sure the Mound Weather facility is some kind of backup for sensitive operations going on in the nation's capital. What else is happening inside is a total mystery. The official story is that the government uses the facility as a defensive bunker and as part of the planning and preparation for emergencies and catastrophes. But it's also filled with unknown equipment, intelligence technology, and personnel. Declassified government records show that FEMA has operated it since 1979. We also know that in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, emergency response teams whisked top Washington officials away to an underground bunker here. That bunker probably exists to this day. What do you think is happening at Mound Weather we don't know about? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Niihau. Niihau is the most forbidden island in Hawaii. It's one of the most beautiful and unique islands in the world, the place where even the ultra-rich can't even dream of vacationing. It's located 17 miles from the resorts of Kauai on the beach, a single stretch of land that's virtually untouched and will remain that way for the near future. The family that owns the island of Niihau restricted it to the 70 residents and their families who live there permanently. These people only live there because the family who's owned the island since the year 1864 invited them. It's 69 square miles, has no grocery stores, no plumbing, no cops, and not even any paved roads. The residents live by drinking rainwater, using solar panels, and either hunting or farming. It's an unspoiled ecosystem with some of the most endangered species living there in total peace and harmony. It's paradise on Earth, which is the reason it's forbidden. If anyone else could go and tourists started flocking there, the island would probably be ruined. So who owns this place? In 1810, the people united the island under the rule of the great Kamehameha I. Then, in 1863, the Sinclair family arrived in Honolulu from New Zealand, at which time King Kamehameha IV offered to sell the island to them. Ever since, the island has stayed in the Sinclair family, currently owned by their descendants Bruce and Keith Robinson. And believe it or not, the Sinclair family only paid $10,000 for it. Menwith Hill. Menwith Hill is the alleged secret U.S. military base in Yorkshire, United Kingdom. Unconfirmed reports say that from this forbidden facility, the United States is carrying out surveillance and assassination programs. Officially, Menwith Hill is a Royal Air Force base. It's huge hugely protected, a massive acreage sitting in the middle of rural North Yorkshire. There are only 10 people here at any given time from the Royal Air Force, and yet there are roughly 1,000 US military personnel here. For every one British person at the base, there are 100 US people. What separates this base from others is its secrecy. You can see the thing from miles away because it has 30 giant white globes spread across its property, looking like huge golf balls. Inside the globes are antennae that link the base to who knows how many satellites circling the globe. And again, who knows what these satellites are doing? Almost certainly gathering information for military, political, and economic use. And the staff allegedly relay directly all of this information to the Pentagon. Simply, Menwith Hill, which isn't even in the US, is the center of the information collection nexus of America. It's the NSA's biggest and most forbidden base, and it's not even on US soil. Ayers Rock. On October 26, 2019, one of the most famous climbs in the world was closed. Ayers Rock, also called Uluru, is a sacred stone in the middle of the Australian outback in the Uluru Kata Tjuta National Park. In October 1985, the government gave the land back to the traditional owners, who immediately pushed the tourists out of their community, but they never closed down Uluru itself, the great red rock rising to greet the sun amidst the red sand of the desert. Not until 2019. Now it's forbidden to climb the sacred stone. You can still visit the rock, but under no circumstance can you climb onto it. While this may not seem like a big deal to the average person, to international climbers and people who know about the rock, it definitely is. At an elevation of 2,831 feet, it was one of the most popular trips to take in Australia, and has been a national monument for many years. The reason climbing on it was so frowned upon goes back to the Aboriginal people of the area. The enormous sandstone formation has been sacred to them for centuries. It's woven into their creation legends, and each crack and fissure represents a story. But for over a century, people were climbing all over it like a jungle gym. Morgan Island. Morgan Island is just off the coast of South Carolina. Some call it Monkey Island since it's home to over 4,000 primates. Some are still used in medical testing. As outrageous as that is to hear, it's true. A landscape that looks like the Planet of the Apes is just a few miles from the coast of South Carolina. But it's not like the Planet of the Apes at all. It would make more sense to call it a monkey farm. It all began in 1979. A brutal wave of the herpes B virus swept through Puerto Rico's monkey population. Researchers shipped a few hundred of these monkeys, rhesus monkeys to be exact, to Morgan Island for research. All these years later, their population has spiked to 4,000, and the birth rate is 750 a year. The reason it's called a monkey farm is that annually, researchers take 500 of these monkeys from their home and use them for medical testing. The federal government protects the entire island, and the only people allowed on it are the researchers who use the monkeys in their experiments. As terrible as it sounds, you might call it a necessary evil. Thanks to the experiments made possible by these monkeys, scientists have made vaccines for polio, AIDS, and even against bioterrorist threats. The Profchka Gate. The Profchka Gate is the highest rock bridge in Europe. The gate stands 52 feet tall, 26 feet wide, and 85 feet long. It's enormous. Located in Bohemian Switzerland in the Czech Republic, it's been a national monument since the 18th century. And even though it looks strong and mighty, it's extremely fragile. And this shocks scientists because it hasn't collapsed under its own weight yet. For this reason, it's forbidden for anyone to walk on it. The Profchka Gate is about 100,000 years old. It formed when the entire area was at the bottom of the sea because of settling sand and erosion. And even though it's called a gate, it doesn't lead anywhere. The biggest sandstone arch in Europe is a natural sandstone color. It's also the most striking thing you can see in the Elbe Sandstone Mountains. It's been out of bounds and forbidden since 1982. And the only way to see it is from a specialized viewpoint. You can still visit the Falcon's Nest Inn nestled in the bridge's shadow, an old hotel built in 1826, but you can't get anywhere near it. Underwater Cave of Skeletons. Researchers discovered what they believe to be one of the oldest skeletons in all the Americas in an underwater cave. This person was laid to rest over 10,000 years ago in a strange ritual performed by ancient people who came way before the Maya. They took the body down into the darkness of the cave before it filled with water and buried him. Humans had only been in the Americas for about 3,000 years before that. The exploration team found the skeleton in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Although this may have been a lush jungle when the Maya took over the region, it was more of a desert 10,000 years ago. The people who lived here would have differed vastly from those who came after. This was not the pre-Columbian Mexico most people think about. The cave's opening was discovered in 2006, then explored by German cave divers. They passed through more than 1,800 feet of dark tunnels before they accidentally came upon the remains of a person from the Ice Age. The researchers brought the bones back to the surface by using sealable bags filled with cave water. For the next 3 years, researchers from the Desert Museum in Saltillo studied the bones to understand them better, but they have learned little about the person so far. They say it was probably a male and that he died at a young age. They also believe that almost immediately after his death, the cave filled with water. 5 million pieces of Lego. There are pieces of Lego that show up on beaches all over the world. It would be pretty difficult to go searching for them since you never know where they're going to end up. But what I can tell you is that there are at least 5 million pieces of Lego currently lost at sea, and that one woman has spent 25 years looking for them. Are you a big Lego fan? Let me know in the comments. It all started in February 1997 when a cargo ship lost its freight. The ship had set sail from Rotterdam and was about 20 miles from the coast of Cornwall when a monster wave hit. The wave tilted the ship 60 degrees in one direction and then 40 degrees in the other. This sent the ship's 62 shipping containers splashing into the ocean. One of those containers had 5 million pieces of Legos in it. To make it even weirder, most of the Lego was sea-themed. They found approximately 4,756,940 pieces related to seafaring adventures. Once the container hit the ground, it burst and released all the Lego. I'm talking about small yellow life jackets, green plastic seagrass, tiny spear guns, and scuba tanks. The works. All lost at sea. Beachcomber Tracy Williams has spent 25 years tracking the lost Lego pieces. She used to spend nights with her children combing the beaches near her home, looking for lost plastic sea dragons. They found pieces as far away as Texas and Australia. The underwater soldier. Researchers discovered the skeleton of a soldier from the 16th century during a routine underwater bridge inspection in the European country of Lithuania. He must have fallen into Lake Asveja 500 years ago, and nobody bothered to get him out. They discovered him wearing his sword at his side, still strapped in his boots. The shifting sediment had buried him. The man's remains were 30 feet beneath the surface under a huge layer of silt and sand. According to archaeologist Elena Prankinate, the skeleton became buried because of currents gradually covering the body with more and more sand over the centuries. This is how things get lost. Dust and sand move around, dirt gets piled on stuff, and boom! 1,000 years later, an entire buried city is 30 feet under the mud. Divers could extract the bones and the artifacts, but nobody knows too much about this man yet. They know he was a man, but they don't know what killed him. The archaeologists uncovered 2 knives along with his iron sword, a leather belt, and a buckle that may help determine his military role. Back in the 1500s, it was the House of Jagiellon that ruled the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. There was a huge castle constructed in 1412 near this lake, on a piece of land that was once an island. It protected the city of Vilnius from attack. Judging by the important look of the belt buckle, the time of death, and that they found him in the water, it's safe to say the soldier may have been protecting an earlier bridge or some other gateway to the castle. He was likely there to protect whichever royals were staying in the castle. Then somehow he wound up fully clothed and dead in the lake. The Siberian Sea Devil. There have been reports of a devil-like sea monster living in Siberia's Lake Labinkir ever since the 19th century. The legends have intrigued scientists who have heard plenty of stories but have never actually seen the monster. This lake is one of the most inaccessible in the world, right in the middle of the coldest region in Russia. That's made it pretty hard to explore. But recently, a team completed a deep dive here under its icy surface, reaching a depth of over 150 feet in freezing cold temperatures. Their goal was to see what mysteries they could find at the bottom of the lake. Sadly, the divers never discovered a monster. What they saw swimming under the frozen surface of the lake was a dogfish. Throughout the entire operation, divers from Russia's most prestigious organizations found nothing except dogfish. They were pretty big, about 6 feet, and frightening looking, but not devils and not monsters. Remains of a sea monster. Something strange happened when a diver who worked in the oil and gas industry discovered the skeleton of a sea monster lying on the bottom of the ocean. The story is a little weird. It comes from Deborah Hatswell, someone who calls herself a paranormal researcher. Deborah says that in 2017, she received footage from the diver in the oil and gas industry showing him using a remotely operated vehicle 3,000 feet below the surface. In the footage, we can see the robot inspecting what we can only describe as the vertebral column of a gigantic beast. It's enormous, measuring roughly 98 feet long. And that's only the vertebrae, not the tail or the flippers or whatever other kind of squishy parts the creature may have had. The dimensions of the skeleton don't fit with any living creature known to science. The person who took the footage didn't know what to do with it, so he put it online and Deborah got a hold of it. The story was never picked up by any mainstream paleontologists or other experts, and it's largely considered a hoax. It's quite disappointing because nobody knows if it's real, if there was a dragon skeleton on the bottom of the ocean, or if they filmed this in somebody's fish tank. Do you think the bones of the mysterious creature could be real? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about strange and mysterious discoveries. An ancient hunting bow. Someone discovered an ancient hunting bow underwater from 460 years ago in Lake Clark National Park, Alaska. They made it between 1506 and 1660, but nobody can quite figure out where it came from. They found the antique weapon on Dena'ina Islands, an ancient indigenous people whose ancestral homelands take up large parts of South and Central Alaska. But what's bizarre is that the initial analysis of the bow shows it wasn't of Dena'ina origin, but appears to more closely resemble Alutiiq style, an indigenous people from another area. Right now, the bow is being investigated by the Park Service's Regional Curatorial Center in Anchorage, with help from archaeologists and indigenous experts. Maybe the bow was used in a trade between two ancient indigenous groups, or they had taken it after some epic battle in the snow and ice. Then it ended up at the bottom of a lake. Missing ship in Lake Superior. A shipwreck that has been missing for 130 years was just discovered in 2022 at the bottom of Lake Superior. The ship is called the Atlanta, and they thought it to have been gone forever. Yet according to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society, they have identified it 30 miles from Deer Park in Michigan, at a murky depth of 650 feet. The Historical Society discovered the 172-foot schooner barge using newly developed sonic technology. They mapped over 2,500 miles of Lake Superior in the summer of 2021, and this was what ultimately led them to the location of the sunken ship. As for when the ship sank, that was back on May 4th, 1891. The Atlanta was carrying a load of coal during a storm when it got caught in a gale. The ship's sails snapped, the crew unloaded into a lifeboat, and the ship was gone. Ever since, nobody thought they would ever find it again. Everyone thought the ship was deep beneath the sediment on the bottom of the lake. But now that they have found it, researchers are amazed to see it's in excellent condition. 130 years in the cold water of Lake Superior has kept the ship in almost the same shape as when it sank. It's practically a time capsule, with all the artifacts left behind by the crew still sitting neatly on the shelves. Rose-shaped coral reef. Scientists recently found a new coral reef off the coast of Tahiti and French Polynesia. It's one of the biggest new coral reefs and is extraordinarily unique because it's shaped like a rose. French photographer Alexis Rosenfield discovered it at a depth of between 90 and 180 feet, with help from the One Ocean campaign. The reason this is so important is that coral reefs are being bleached at an alarming rate. The bleaching is death for a coral reef, which leads to a break in the food chain and a cascading effect of marine destruction. But this rose-shaped coral reef appears to have been completely unaffected by any of the bleaching events that have destroyed many other coral reefs. It looks like it's in pristine condition, which is excellent news. It's also strange because they can find the vast majority of coral reefs at only shallow depths of up to 75 feet. It's a little unusual that they have found a coral reef at nearly double that depth and in a much darker part of the ocean. Whatever it means, scientists don't quite know, but it appears to be good news for the ocean, or at least this area. A sunken UFO. Researchers have discovered an unidentified flying object at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Of course, it's not an unidentified flying object since it's submerged. It's more like an unidentified sunken object, a USO. But whatever you want to call it, people seem to believe it is an alien spaceship. An amateur investigator discovered the alleged sunken spaceship. He was poking around on Google Earth when he came across a questionable dark circle off the coast of Peru. The object appears to be nearly 5 miles wide and sitting right at the bottom of the ocean, weirdly close to the Nazca Lines in Peru. It's these same conspiracy theorists who think extraterrestrial beings, rather than the ancient people who lived in the Peruvian desert, made the Nazca Lines. The presence of an alien spaceship just off the coast bolsters these ideas. But of course, there is no solid proof that we're talking about an extraterrestrial ship. It does kind of look like Hollywood's idea of a UFO, but it also looks like a rock. Until a team of scientists can get down to the bottom of the sea and dig the shape out, we'll never know the truth. The Wolverine Fish. Scientists have discovered a new freshwater species of fish. It's fascinating for one main reason. It has claws like Wolverine from X-Men. They have even given it the name the Wolverine Fish. It was discovered in 2021, along with over 200 additional species of freshwater fish. In case you didn't know already, scientists identify lots of new species every year. Many of them are already going extinct, and some are totally freaky. The Wolverine fish is a type of pleco catfish. It has spikes on the ends of its little paws that it uses as powerful weapons. On the side of its face, right under its eyeballs, are what look like small hands that would make a T-Rex feel long-armed, and at the ends of the hands are 3 fearsome spiky claws. The fish lives in the Brazilian river of Rio Xingu, and they have never found it anywhere else. It uses its claws as a defense mechanism when other creatures harass it. It's able to push claws out of its skin to slash its enemies, just like Wolverine from the comic books. Thanks for watching! Which marine creature terrifies you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you later! Bye!